Mocked by the frivolous. When we first started taking a look at John chapter 18 and how Jesus was treated before he was actually put to death, we noticed four things in the first half of John chapter 18. The first place, the first 5 verses, Jesus was betrayed by the hypocritical. They'd listened to him. They knew that he was in the public view. On so many occasions, they did nothing. They came in the dead of night. Judas betrays him with a kiss. Later goes back and tells those that arrested Jesus, well, I made a mistake, and they said, we don't care. The second place, in verse 10 and verse 11, we talked about Simon Peter drawing a sword to defend Jesus, that Jesus defended by the passionate. And sometimes that passionate energy or those passionate conclusions or those passionate actions are actually not correct at all. In the third place, beginning in verse 12, going through verse 23, we talked about Jesus being questioned by the high priest of his day. And the response that Jesus makes is this: I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where the Jews always meet. In secret I've said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. The question? The high priest asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. And Jesus responds by saying, that's an open book. You should know that. As a result, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus, basically saying, how dare you answer the high priest that way? And Jesus said, if I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil, but if I've spoken well, why do you hit me? Jesus, smitten by the unreasonable. Down in verse 15 through 27, again, it kind of overlaps those verses we just mentioned. Peter following at a distance, Peter huddling with those who have been involved in that illegal arrest of Jesus. Peter warming himself by the fire among soldiers and servants. Peter denying Jesus. Jesus being denied by the cowardly. For the time we have together, I want to talk about 5, 6, 7, and 8 items in this particular chapter. We're going to end in verse 3 of chapter 19. But in the next place, in the 5th place, down in verse 28, they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the Praetorium, Roman seat of government. It was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the Praetorium lest they should be defiled, that they might eat the Passover. Now here are individuals that recognize Jesus as a Jew just like the rest of them. They're not going to go into a place that's occupied by Gentiles. They think that defiles them. But they're going to let Jesus go in. Don't care that Jesus was Jewish just as were they. Don't care about Jesus whatsoever. So in this particular verse, you have individuals that are shunning Jesus and shunning where they actually place him. Jesus is shunned by the self-righteous. And that self-righteous kind of mindset continues, still plagues the world. And it is as illegitimate as any of these other problematic areas in which people have responded to Jesus in very unusual and irrational ways. The Jewish leadership, they're no different than the rest. Beginning in verse 33, going through verse 38, Pilate actually starts questioning Jesus. Now, to begin with, Pilate says to the group that have brought Jesus, what accusation do you bring against him? And they say, if he were not an evildoer, would we not have delivered him up to you? They don't answer the question. Then Pilate says, you take Jesus and judge him according to your law. The Jews said, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. We want him dead. So beginning of verse 33, Jesus is questioned by the ambitious. Are you the king of the Jews? Pilate asked. Jesus said, are you speaking for yourself on this, or did others tell you this about me? And Pilate gets upset. I'm not a Jew. Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? And then Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from here. I'm not putting up a fight. Pilate said to him, "Are you a king then?" And Jesus says, "You say rightly that I'm a king. For this cause I was born, for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate's question, what is truth? And you can hear the sarcasm. But there's so many people in our world today that fit in that same category. What is truth? Well, truth is whatever I say that it is, or truth is whatever the government says that it is. Truth is whatever community says it is. There is no absolute truth. Have you ever noticed that if somebody says there is no such thing as absolute truth, they're making an absolute statement that by their own admission cannot be true? Irrationality, inconsistency, ignorance, self-righteousness, arrogance, gone to seed. And it has flourished in a jungle of vegetation in our world. Jesus questioned by the ambitious. But Pilate comes back and says in verse 38, I don't find any fault in this individual. And maybe I won't agree with what he says, but he's not worthy of death. So in the very beginning of chapter 19, Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. The soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and they said, "Hail, King of the Jews." They struck him with their hands. Ridicule. Jesus mocked by the frivolous. Soldiers don't care. For them it's just a moment of sport and ridicule and mockery to somebody that they deem as beneath them. So really, when you contrast what happens there with what you see in our society today, humanity has not changed. We mentioned that before. People are the same as they've been for over 2,000 years. The anger, the irrationality, the way that people disagree. In our day and age, they can't discuss things. Back then, the Jewish leadership had a problem with discussing things with Jesus because Jesus always got the better of them. And they couldn't answer the way that he responded to their questions. You wonder why so many atheists and agnostics are so antagonistic? They really haven't thought things through. Jesus was mocked by the frivolous. You could also say Jesus was mocked by the sadistic. You could also say Jesus was mocked by the ignorant. And those categories still exist today. So whenever there are people around you that show a great deal of disdain, shout ugly words, or maybe even threaten violence, or that violence is carried out because of your faith, you're dealing with frivolous, sadistic, ignorant people, just like the people that had Jesus put to death almost 2,000 years ago. We live in a culture that is becoming more hateful towards any kind of rational discussion. And irrational thought is something that seems to rule the day. Christians will be mocked by people in a lot of these different categories. But that's nothing new. That's the way they treated Jesus. Interesting chapter. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.